We would like to take a look on how firewalls in Ubuntu function. Actually, in order to have more than one service from a single IP address, Linux uses a notion of ports. For example, port number 80 is the common name for HTTP, 21 is for FTP, 22 is for SSH, and users can connect to offered services by typing the service IP address and its specific port number. Here comes the notion of firewalls, that they help us to open and close ports for specific IP addresses, subnets, or interfaces. This is actually suitable when we want certain IP addresses to have access to our server while the default access to stay restricted. In Ubuntu, the firewall wrapper is named Uncomplicated Firewall, or in short, UFW. And it's installed but stays in disabled state. And we can check the status of UFV by typing sudo UFV status, and we see that the firewall is inactive. If you would like to protect our machine and to completely isolate the access towards it, we can use sudo default deny incoming, and actually we have to type UFV here. Right now no connections towards our server can be established. If we type sudo UFV status numbered, we see that although we have this rule installed, the status of the firewall is inactive. So we should type sudo UFV enable to run the rule. But as we see that we are already connected to this machine, and this will cut out our SSH connection. So we are warned if we really want to apply this rule. Let's say no for now. We can replace here allow for the incoming, so the default policy is changed, and we can run this rule by typing sudo UFV status verbose. We can also look in details at those rules, so we see that the default policy is to allow the incoming and the outgoing traffic. If we type sudo UFV reset, this will restore our firewall to its defaults. So if we again type status verbose, we see that the firewall is even inactive. So let's now play with some of the rules. We can type sudo UFV reject SSH, and now we take a look at the status and enable the firewall. So type sudo UFV enable, and we see that the two ports 22 for version 4 and version 6 of the IP protocol will be rejected. If we would like to delete this rule, we will just append sudo UFV delete reject SSH, and now we can check the status, and we see it's the default firewall status where all the incoming and outgoing traffic are allowed. We can reject all the HTTP traffic, and let's check again the rules. We also have a way to check the number of execution of those rules. So we will type sudo UFV status numbered, and we see that we have two rules which fall next after each other. So if we are now trying to reject some other traffic, let's say HTTPS, and check again the status of our rules, we see that their rule numbering is changed. Actually, we can very easily delete and insert numbers. So if we type sudo UFV delete and then the number which we would like to delete, let's say the first number, and again we check our firewall rules, we see that they are updated. Okay, let's try to forbid SSH connections to our server. So just type sudo reject 22 was the port by TCP, or we can just type sudo reject SSH, and this is with the UFV in front. We can show our firewall now. We are rejecting this port, which is the SSH connection, and we can enable and disable our firewall. So first we'll disable the firewall and then re-enable it to reread those rules. We'll try with another terminal to connect towards the server. Okay, and we see that the connection has been reset by peer. This means that a connection is already filtered. Alright, let's re-enable the connection so that we can connect again to our server. This we'll do by just appending here delete towards this rule. If we show the numbered rules, we see that the number is not active. Again, we'll disable and enable the firewall to reread the rules. And now if we run our terminal with the same SSH, we'll see that we can connect to our server. Server names are hard to remember, so here's a trick. The Uncomplicated firewall reads those service names from etc services, so we can type more etc services, and we'll see on the right side the common names of the services, and on the left side what kind of protocols and ports they work with. So we see here that for the SSH we have the 22 TCP and much more protocols. Here is the web server, HTTP, the POP server, and if you would like to use common names, this is from where we can grab those names. The next thing we would like to see is in Linux, when a certain service is installed, in order to communicate with the outside world, it could modify the firewall rules by adding its own rules. In such cases, we can type sudo ufv app list. And for now, we see on this machine we have opened only OpenSSH, and the SSH server has created its own profile. In order to get deep into this, we can type the same, but this time info here, and then in quotes the name of the open service. And we see that actually we are opening 22nd port, and this has been done by the installation of this service. So this is an easier way to see how external programs are opening ports on our system. The other way, as you can remember, is by issuing nmap and let's say localhost or its address, and we can see also from the scan that we have port 22 using protocol TCP as open, because we are connecting with the SSH towards this port in order to administer the server. We can issue several commands which are more specific. If we type sudo ufw and then deny incoming packets through the ETH0 interface coming from this IP address, this means that all the packets which are coming from this IP address and are targeted towards our ETH0 interface will be denied. And now again we can of course list the rules in our firewall, and we see that everything which is coming to ETH0 interface will be denied if its source address is this IP address. We can also with firewall limit the access to SSH server of specific IP address. So we can type sudo ufw deny proto TCP from, and here we'll type the IP address we would like to restrict to access SSH to any IP address, and this is the port number 22. So we can see rule number 4, if a connection is coming from this IP address and trying to access 22nd port on our server, it will be denied. Now if we check our IP address, we see that we are using this IP address for our Ethernet card, With a firewall rule, we can limit only SSH access towards our address. This can be done by using sudo ufw allow protocol TCP from anywhere to our IP address, which is 10.0.2.10, and then we'll add the port 22. So if we again check our rules of the firewall, we see that all the incoming packets from anywhere will be allowed to access our server here. Okay, here are the rules in our firewall. I recommend you, if you are not sure on what you're doing with the firewall, just to reset it. So we can type sudo ufw reset, and right now the firewall will be inactive. For more information, you can actually look at the Ubuntu's help page on specific firewall rules which you can customize. Here in the UFW page, you can see different commands, how to allow specific traffic based on port and protocols, how to delete rules, and how to check the status of the firewall and the logging, how to turn it on. Also, you can limit or allow users to connect by using subnet masks. The same is for denying access. Here in the advanced example, you can see that we are denying 2 IP addresses from having access to our SSH server, and the third rule is to allow all other IP addresses to have access. As you can see, this will create those rules, and just because the first rules will have priority, number 1 and 7 will have access to our SSH server, and the next IP addresses will not. So that's it, guys. You know how to configure your uncomplicated firewall. And if you like the information, you can subscribe to the channel.